what your choices have been, and what karmic timelines and contracts you have journeyed. The light is calling for the reunification of all aspects of life in this realm now. It is calling for the cleansing of all polarities. It is calling for the rising of all sacred heart centers now. All are being summoned home to the greater light now. Hi, and welcome to Whole Soul Mastery and Whole Soul School and Foundations joint podcast series. I'm here with Dr. Paul Panzica, back again today. I know it's been a few months. We need to hear some Paul perspectives because you always take us into the deep, into the realms of the deep where a lot of the insights and the awareness and the liberation happens, really. So thank you. Thank you, Paul, for joining me. Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yep, here we are in July 2024. We know it's been a hot summer, at least here in the US, right? And touching other places, but some heat. We're going to talk about some things that you've been writing about, Paul, and things that travel through your muse. And I always like to hear your perspective. I like to enter your world and see what you see and bring that awareness to our listeners. And so where would you like to lead us off, Paul? Where do we want to start?
Well, I think maybe it was March or April that we talked last. I can't remember exactly when. Oh yeah, I mean a lot of things have occurred, and I've written a lot of things. I've written so much that I kind of forgot what I wrote because it's a lot of stuff, And every time I think I'm going to just throw a little bit of something down for the month, it turns into this big long essay that I'm sure people just don't want to deal with anymore. But
right,
read it.
And let me just say that, Paul, you can't write just a few words. I, in fact, can't write just a few words. The two of us are verbose, right? And you got.
But I think I got you beat on that. I think I have you beat on.
I agree.
Pedantic.
I agree. So this is just the first paragraph of Paul's latest blog post on Beyond the Soul's Meridian, okay? And the title is Ascension and the Fifth Density. We're going to talk about some of these bigger concepts. And so with Ascension and the Fifth Density, Paul writes, in this new age, the final sacrament is ordination, which in the higher densities can only be acquired through spiritual universal authority. Therefore, there will be many ascended beings bearing testament to this authority as the living embodiment of their most truthful selves. This is what Jesus meant when he said that you will accomplish greater things than I have done because I go to the Father. This is a profound reference to I am, as it means that the initiate is one with our living brother and Father. This relationship is personal and cosmic, uniting us in common purpose in service to our Holy Mother and all her sisters and daughters. That's the opener. Do you want to take it from there? I mean, there's a lot to unpack in just that, right?
And that's just one paragraph.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack. Oh my God. So, and that's the beauty of our scriptures and I mean, and maybe the genius of these of our mythologies and our stories is that, at the beginning, at least, they were given to us through other worldly sources, ascended worlds, mainly like the Pleiadians were giving us this information, and many others, I'm sure, and so they give you a simplistic story, to consider, and then the more you consider it, the more you realize this isn't a simplistic story. There's a lot of depth to this. Yes. And as your awareness expands, so does your interpretation expand and the meaning of those, let's say, parables or mythologies or stories that you have, they start to take on new meaning. And I think that's, there's references to that passage that you read, that go to the parables of Jesus. And I think it's unfortunate we're at the threshold of something major. I think we're really very close. Hopefully maybe within the next 12 to 18 months. My wife and I, Nancy, will wake up in the morning, and depending on the day of the week, we'll ask each other, so what do you think? And so that is usually given as a number.
Yeah.
And usually it's like, I think we're 72% certain that we're going to have some major event occur within the next 12 to 18 months. That's what we mean. So I think this morning we were at 72%. There's a 72% chance that something will
Threshold
happen.
we're going to cross. A threshold we're going to
We're
cross.
at the threshold now. We're at the threshold now. And so I really do think, we're looking into it. I think, and that was really a big part of that essay, is about threshold guardians, which we definitely could talk about, because that's something that we have to face, right? And that passage, what that passage is talking about, that you just read, it has to do with our holy family. Who is it? What is our holy family, right? And so I think the holy family is basically the teachings of Jesus, and he really took the attitude that, listen, I'm not anyone to be worshipped. He goes, I'm your brother, and this reference to your Father in heaven, right? And so that is extremely, extremely, extremely important to understand that relationship. And it almost gets him killed in one of the chapters in John, where there's so much in this one chapter, and I can't remember the chapter. I think it's the 39th chapter, but I could be wrong. But it's the one where they're going to stone the woman to death. And we kind of don't actually know who the woman was, and some people say it was Magdalene. I don't think it was, but regardless, that's where he's doing something very cryptic, and he's writing some symbols in the ground as he's listening to their arguments and about how they want to stone this woman to death. And then that's where he says, okay, well, those of you who are without sin, then you cast the first stone, and that disperses the crowd. And then he starts to teach them something that's so profound, but it also gets them very upset. And that's what he teaches them. He tells them that if you come to know the truth, then you will be free. You will be free if you come to know the truth. But if you don't come to know the truth, then you're just a slave in this world, right? And so that's where he tries to explain to them that if you are a member of the family, and what family is he talking about? Well, it's kind of like, we think it's just a metaphorical family, but I know he's talking about the cosmic family. He's talking about our brethren. He's talking about the source from where we came. And he's saying that if you're a member of the family, then you will never, ever, ever be a slave. But if you're not a member of the family, then you're a slave. And this got these people really upset, and so they say, well, what are you talking about? They say, well, we're the children of Abraham. We were born free men. And then he said, well, if you're the children of Abraham, then why do you hate me? Because I know if you're the children of Abraham, you would love me, but why do you hate me? And that got him even more upset. And they say, well, we're the children of God. And he says, well, the children of God wouldn't want to kill me, because at this point now they're picking up stones and they're getting ready to kind of like really do some harm to him. And that's where he lays into him, and he says that you're not the children of God, because if you were the children of God, you would love me, you would not hate me. And then if you're the children, he says this, he tells them they're the children of the devil. And he says, your father is basically like is a deceiver, and he's the Lord of all deception. And it really upsets these people. So already then in that passage, he's making a very distinct difference, or he's separating people from one direction and another direction by asking them a very straightforward question, which is, who is your father? That's the question. Who is your father? Who is your father? And what he's trying to tell them is that if your consciousness rises to a certain point, you'll realize that we all come from the same celestial parents that binds us together through love. Because the words that I project, if you were part of the family, you would love me for those words, right? For my actions and for my deeds. There would be no animosity there, right? But there are still many people that not only can't resonate with those words, but don't even value those words, or don't even value those concepts anymore. So I think that was a very powerful passage. Read that entire chapter, and it's really amazing. In the end, he almost dies, and then they say it wasn't his time yet, and he miraculously escapes. But that's another interesting passage. It wasn't his time. It wasn't his time. So when was his time? Well, we've had to go through like almost 2,000 years, of oppression, before the age changed. And now, guess what? As we're moving into this ascensionary, timeline, it is his time. It is his time, right? And so we're looking at, I think the way that I'm addressing this now is that I'm actually realizing that we have our birth parents who stewarded us as we grew up, and they gave us exactly what we needed to become mature adults. Whether that was positive or negative, it doesn't matter, because this is exactly what we needed to get to the point where we're at right now. But ultimately, the parents of our soul's parents, our heavenly parents, our celestial father, and our celestial mother. And our celestial mother, I look at that as Gaia. I look at that as the goddess of this planet. She is really what birthed us. And our father is the Logos, is this cosmic universal father. It's not the same father that we've been taught to believe, that is a creation of, let's say, the archons or the lower rulers' idea of what God is. It transcends all of that, right? And Jesus even says, he says that, that you'll go on to do greater things than I have, because I have gone to the Father. I am of the Father. I have opened that portal for you, right? And so if you consider yourself as a being that lives within this relationship of I am, because remember, Jesus is called the I am, and the Father in heaven is called I am the I am, right? And we are I am. Then we're all one family, and so there's nothing to worry about. I mean, there's nothing that can actually touch us on the physical plane that can derail or detract from that relationship.
Ah, it's powerful. I mean, it's
well, yeah, it is powerful. So that's the other thing that I wanted to mention. So maybe I'll go back and we'll talk about something else later. But I wanted to mention this because I was listening to the last video that you posted, the last transmission that you posted.
yes.
And it was shorter than the other ones, but I think it was very powerful. and in it you mentioned the energies of the Arcturian blue
Frequencies.
frequency. And then you also mentioned gnosis, right? You said Arcturian blue frequencies emulate wisdom, gnosis, which is knowledge from within, peace, strength, and the ability to alchemize lower frequencies into higher celestial energies. But you brought it up, right? And so what is gnosis, right? And it's inner knowledge, right? It's knowledge of the heart. There's different ways to describe it, but it is more than that, right? So, I'm just going to go out and say it. It's the final pathway to where we're supposed to be going. It encompasses that pathway. So you're mentioning it in your transmission. And I think this Arcturian source, this blue energy of the Arcturian source, which is a higher chakra, right? It's above the fifth. It's higher chakra. It's fifth and higher chakra energy. So they want us to consider gnosis. And so what does that mean? Well, there was a whole group of people called Gnostics. And all that means is they were knowers. They were knowers of a certain truth. They were knowers of a certain truth. And it was in that last age, which was not his time yet. It was not the time of Christ. I would say Christ Sophia, because what happens is that any time during the last 2,000 years that anyone tried to bring this knowledge forward, they were severely attacked, and genocides were launched against them, and they were suppressed, right? And so because it wasn't their time, right? But now we are in this timeline. We have, I think, stepped into this timeline, so that this information now not only can be understood, but it's essential that it not only has to be understood, but it has to be assimilated. We have to now understand that our religion, our Western religion, was co-opted, and it was usurped shortly after the life of Jesus, when he was trying to teach us these mysteries. And you know what? There was an understanding of mysteries before him too. You know, that could probably go all the way back to the time of Atlantis, and that these were kept alive amongst initiated sources or initiated groups that unfortunately were perverted and corrupted and usurped also, right? So that was really, and that's why Jesus came to this earth, to teach us properly and to demonstrate to us and to lay out the path of how we're supposed to go into this process of ascension. I'm telling you, you look at any of the extraterrestrial sources that are beneficent, that are aligned to the human cause, and the Christ consciousness is front and center in all of it. I mean, it's that important for us to understand. And so what is it that we're supposed to learn from all of this? And it was what the Gnostics had discovered. It wasn't really, they didn't discover it, but they practiced it. And so it has to do with sacraments. Oh my God, sacraments, please, not organized religion again. Don't talk about that. I already know all about the sacraments. And that's a shame, because it turns out that, there's the sacraments. So there's the baptism, there's the christening, there's the Eucharist. If you're looking at this from a Catholic or Orthodox perspective, there is the ordination of priests, and then there's the last rites that are dispensed at your death. 5 sacraments, right? And then there were 2 more sacraments. There were 2 other sacraments. One was called the sacred marriage, or the hieros gamos, or the pneumatic union. There's a bunch of different names for it. And then there was one called redemption. The organized religions of the last age, whether the conventional organized religions of the last age, I'm not going to blame one or the other. They're all guilty of it. Basically taught that those don't happen in this life. The Hieros Gamos, or the sacred marriage, or the pneumatic marriage, which means the marriage to the spirit, and redemption do not happen in this life. Why? Because they come after the dispensing of your last rites when you die. That's how they put these in a sequence, right? So that happens after you're dead. So there's no reason or to actually consider these things, because you can't achieve them in this reality. But apparently some people had achieved it in this reality. And in doing so, and in talking about it, they were severely attacked and suppressed, right? And so that was really the reason why there was genocides launched against these organizations, starting a few hundred years after the life of the master teacher. That people aren't supposed to know about this. They're not supposed to know about it.
Wow.
Yeah. So the thing is, and I don't know, I'm not saying that there's one pathway, because everyone is unique, and that this is all going to, I think, unfold as that to the uniqueness of the individual. I get it. There's no doubt about it. But there was a roadmap that was given to us that not many people are paying attention to, and certainly maybe because they've hidden it, or they've obfuscated it behind all the opulence and the hypocrisy of the last couple of thousand years of organized religion. So it totally turns people off, and they don't want to really look at this. But they have to understand it. It's part of your heritage, and it has been suppressed for the last 2,000 years, and that it was always meant to help the individual come to the truth that Jesus was talking about, which almost got him killed, knowing the truth, and then he'll free you. And that that's really in his teaching is the only way that we could do it was through this process. And it is a sacrament that allegedly doesn't exist. This union between the soul and the spirit is the sacred marriage, right? It's coming to your higher self. We'll use the term higher self, because higher self, I think, is what I think it actually is. It's what we call the higher self. Some people call it your higher soul or your oversoul. There's all these different names for it. But coming to that allows us then to be redeemed. So what are we being redeemed from? Right? So that what they were talking about was very interesting. And it had to do with the way that it was defined as you're being distanced, you're being separated from a safe distance from that which was enslaving you. All right. And so you're being separated from a safe distance from that which has been enslaving you. And so that in that sense is that you go through this process of unification with your soul, or the essence of who you really are, and your higher self. And there's all different experiences that was going to manifest. And it's going to take you a while to process that. It took me 15 years, and I still don't know if I'm still really finished processing it yet. But I think that has to happen first before anything else can occur. So the question is what are we being redeemed from? And I think that the answer, at least for me, was you're being redeemed from the shadow that exists within you. We use the term ego, and we've talked about this big ego versus little ego, big ego versus little ego. The big ego is the truthful, spiritual ego, and the little ego is the shadow ego. So we can use the two terms together. You know, the little ego and the shadow are basically the same things. We're going to find out that the supremacy of that little bitty ego that was controlling all of your thoughts and making sure that you followed all the rules and adhered to all the conventions, you know, and listened to all the authorities, you're going to realize is not the path that I should be on. You're going to realize that you don't kill it, because there's elements of ego that are still important. Like, it can calculate really well, and it can help you navigate through this crazy landscape of insanity. But you have to understand that it isn't the source of your intelligence, or it's the source of your wisdom. It's only a tool that we can use to contemplate ideas or visions that are given to it, right? And so it also helps us to manifest things on the physical plane, but it is not what we should be following. And so we're kind of being redeemed from all of those shadow energies and all of that. But some people describe it as reversing the flow of consciousness from the head downward towards the heart and the body, and then now it's going to start flowing from the heart up towards the head, right? That's another way of talking about it. So there's this redemption, and the thing that they hated most about redemption, and I talk about I'm talking about our handlers and the people that basically had created this, you know, false matrix of truth that we've been adhering to for the last 2,000 plus years. The reason why they hated it so much is that when a person goes through redemption, they're no longer afraid. They're no longer being controlled by fear. They're redeemed from fear, and that's the worst thing for the for these archons to for that to happen, is when their slaves no longer listen to them, when their slaves no longer fear them. And that's what this whole process has been about. It's waiting to be discovered. And I think that there's going to be something. And I think that something that's going to happen is going to have nothing to do with the internet. It's going to have nothing to do with the political insanity that's going on. It's going to have nothing to do with the monetary system. It's going to have nothing to do with any of it. It can't come through those constructs because they belong to the old energy. They cannot be transfigured. They cannot be salvaged. You even mentioned this before, Marie, before we were on camera. You said you imagine it's a giant iceberg that's melting, right? Yes. That's melting. And that some people can only see the little tip of the iceberg, and that there's some people that can see the entire iceberg. And in a sense, that's exactly how I envisioned it, as that old matrix is dissolving. It's dissolving. And that's actually an energy that the goddess possesses. When the goddess manifests herself, she starts to dissolve the old matrix of enslavement. That's just her function. That's what she does. So we're going to come to some new balance. We're going to come to some new understanding, right? And we're going to have to at least go through the process of marrying ourselves, or at least meeting our higher self. It has to happen, and it better happen soon. But I'm 72% sure it's going to happen within the next
weather.
12 to 18 months. Maybe I'm wrong. And listen, I can tell you with surety, it already happened to me, and that was 15 years ago. And I was at the time very confused as to why am I witnessing this? I mean, I get it and I know what it is, but why are you giving it to me now? Well, and I think the reason is to be able to speak about it when it starts happening to more people. I suspect it's going to happen kind of like through circumstances that will be beyond anyone's control. I suspect that it's going to be cosmic in scale, that all of these crazy, chaotic things that are being done to try to prevent it, which is kind of pathetic, actually. It can't be stopped, because this has to do with the movements of celestial bodies. It has to do with the movements of the heavens. Cannot be stopped. And I think that's coming. And so there's absolutely nothing to fear from this. It is coming, and it has to happen. And their souls have to be awoken. They have to be awake. They have to see this. And those who see this and who feel that this is a valuable experience, or can understand this experience, it's going to be amazing for them. There's going to be a lot of other people that won't be able to resonate with the meaning, will be confused, and then we'll look at it as a threat to the systems, the matrix that's already dissolving in front of our eyes right now. So that's going to happen. I think that's really what we're looking at.
Well, and I think when you described that experience of 15 years back, I think many of us were called in our own ways to look at the hard stuff that a lot of people look at, more of the iceberg. If it's like the stuff under the surface that we don't see, we've been traveling in that for some time, not just to awaken dormant truths that all-knowing portal of the heart center already is in tune with. It already knows the history of the planet and the truth and the lies that we've been living in. But I also think we're freeing up space. We're freeing up bandwidth. We're freeing up life force that can meet the new information or old information, whatever you want to call that, that's getting revealed to us. I think the people who are better able to meet that are the people who have been stepping outside their comfort zone and taking a look deeper into the iceberg. And because we have space and room and bandwidth and life force to integrate it a little bit better, versus it being like a tsunami of a melting, dissolving process where it's just like washing over people. I think we have some people who are somewhere in their journey of making room for this will be able to take that new information and go to the next level in our consciousness. We're being up-leveled, right? We're being upgraded. And that's why it's always good, if people haven't started this process, but somehow have bounced into this podcast, it's always good to start now. Start where you are, right? Start where you are. But the key to me is making room, allowing the dissolving process to take place. Things you used to believe in, things you used to love, things that you were attached to, that you felt like you had to have, whatever those things are, a lot of that is under review right now. And that might be relationships or a job or whatever it might be. I think we're making room, making space for a new age of consciousness inside ourselves and allowing an integration to rise to meet it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. There's, but we have to face all of it, right? So, let's say that I was listening to one transmission or one source, and it was saying that virtually all of us on this world right now have been incarnated at least 20 times during the last 2,000 years, during the last age. 20 lives we've lived.
Wow.
And if we were, and many of us may go all the way back to the Lemurian time or Atlantean time, there may be 1,000 or more incarnations that we've experienced. So every time we come back into this realm, we're blinded, or we have no idea what we've experienced in the previous lives. And so before we can even go through this process, the sacred union, right, which is really the goal, I think for all of us, is to come to that point. We have to do a lot of work before we can get there. And if you haven't prepared yourself, and if you haven't done the work, then it's going to be disastrous. In fact, it probably would be meaningless, or it might even be a more horrific experience. I wouldn't say it would be horrific. It would just be meaningless. So what is the work? What do we have to do? And what we have to do is we have to face it. This has to do with the cycles of living on Earth that we've been imprisoned within. And it has to do with what they call the lunar cycle, which has to do with the movement of the moon. So if you want to look at it from an astrological perspective, there's a lunar month, and we map out these things called the nodes of the moon, right? And so that kind of like moves, and it really is where the moon makes an orbit, and it's kind of like at an angle to the Earth, and it kind of like shifts. And at the axis point where it's shifting on that orbit is where the nodes are, right? And so that's a marking point. Anyway, I don't want to go on all the details of it, but the point is that it's like it tracks our history, which it enslaves us. The moon is considered to be the soul, and so going through these lunar cycles, living in linear time here on the Earth, we've accumulated a history. And the summation of that history is within what they call the south node of the moon. Interesting. And that is what karma is. And so it also in the esoteric schools is known as all that we have been. It's a summation of all that we have been. The question is, do you know all that you have been? Have you faced that truth of all that you have been? So the answer is maybe you have, and the answer is maybe you haven't. It just depends on how self-aware you are. So, and I wrote this in the essay, I said, what's the difference between the exalted and the damned? What's the difference between the exalted soul and the damned soul? Self-awareness. Awareness in all that I have been. Because the whole point of living here on Earth, which actually is an artificial construct, the third density reality that we're forced to live in is a system of incarceration and imprisonment, right? It is a valuable, it's probably the most valuable tool supposedly in the universe that helps us to grow and to learn. Now, why are we here? And that question I can't answer, because some sources will say we're here to learn more about ourselves, right? And we're learn more about our relationships to others and to God and all these other things. And some people are saying, no, you're really a bad soul and you're here for rehabilitation. And then there's other soul groups that say, and many of us came to help those others that were stuck in the karmic cycles and to end all of this misery and pain. I think there's a myriad of reasons why we're here, but that's for you to discover why you're here. No one can tell you why you're here. And the only way that you can understand why you're here is to face the summation of all that you have been, which is your karma. So if you haven't gone through the process of introspection, of meditative and contemplative introspection, if you haven't developed the courage to look at the elements of your astrology or the elements of your soul in a more objective way, then discovering who you were in the past may be devastating to you. It may be so traumatic that it'll just destroy you when you find out who you really were. And I use the example of the story of Oedipus Rex. You know, that's exactly what the story is about. It's a quintessential tragedy, right? Sophocles wrote this story. Quintessential tragedy. So you know, I mean, and just to remind you of the story, you know, the story was, it was screwed up from the beginning. So, you know, it was prophesied that the child that was born into this family would kill the father. So then they decided to kill the kid, and then the mother decided that I wasn't going to kill the kid, I would just give it away to somebody else. And you know, it was a comedy. It was like Macbeth. It's like a kind of like a Macbeth story in the sense that it's self-fulfilling prophecies over and over and over again. And so it all hinges on a mistake that's compounded by more and more and more and more and more mistakes, right? And when you think you're doing good, you're not, because you can't see the entire picture of what's happening. All right, so basically, you know, Oedipus grows up away from his family, thinking that his mother and father were his real mother and father, in the sense they were just his adopted mother and father. And he's like a prince. And then he's also told in prophecy that he will indeed kill his father, thinking that he was going to kill his adopted father. He leaves. And on his way back to this city, which is Thebes, he's traveling through Greece, and he's on his way to Thebes. He runs into another guy on a chariot. They get into an argument, and this guy's all animated and upset. And so he pushes him, and the guy falls and he smashes his head against the wheel of the chariot, and he dies. And it turned out that was his dad. That was his real dad. So the prophecy is fulfilled, but he doesn't know it. So now he comes into this city where this guy was from. Turned out he was the king of this city, but he doesn't know it because he just killed this guy on this, and no one really figured it out yet. And the city is being besieged by this threshold guardian called the Sphinx. Mm-hmm. And so the Sphinx was this being that had the head and the breast of a woman, and then the body of a lion and the wings of an eagle. And it was tearing everybody apart, just killing everybody. And so before it would kill you, it would ask you this riddle, and it was called the riddle of the Sphinx. And no one could figure out the riddle. No one could stop this terror from happening. And the riddle was basically, what being goes on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, and 3 legs in the evening. And the more legs that the being has, the weaker it is. And so the answer to that is a human being, a man. It was the answer, right? And so man, and so he was able to answer that riddle. And in the process of doing that, the Sphinx falls dead at his feet, and he's hailed as a hero, and he becomes the new king of Thebes. And he winds up marrying the queen, which was his mom. So this just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Right? And so then he sets out this decree. We got to figure out, because he finds out that the king had been killed, not knowing that he killed the king. And so there's this decree, and we have to find out who the guy that was killed the king, and that man must be punished. And so they start figuring out that it was him that did all of these things. And worse, he not only had, you know, an incestuous relationship with his mother, but he had kids with his mom, right? So this just keeps getting
goes from bad to worse. Right? Yeah.
It gets bad to worse. And so the gist of the story is, he finds out, even after he was told by the oracles, don't pursue this, he is focused on finding out the truth. And in finding out the truth, then his wife is beside herself, and she winds up committing suicide. And what does he do? He gouges his eyes out with her hairpins. And that's the end of the story, you know. And so what is the meaning of the story? See, so it really is, it's archetypal in the sense of what may happen when you discover the truth of who you really are.
Yes.
Oh, you mean to tell me I did that? You mean to tell me this happened to me? You mean to tell me, oh, so you discover the truth of what it is like to live in error. And so that's, and it could be that devastating, right? It could be that devastating. And so we have to get this through our minds right now and really have to come to accept it. That the only difference between an exalted person and one that is damned is not the things that they did in previous lives or even in this life. It's the lack of self-awareness.
Wow.
Because that is what's going to do us in, right? So get it through your already that you're guilty of all kinds of crimes. You're guilty of all kinds of atrocities, and you're guilty of all kinds of limitations and disappointments and oh, I could have done that life better. Oh, I could have done that life. Hey, that's what it's like to be human, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to understand. Now, there are many of us that are now, and so if we've processed this information correctly, right, between the time between your sequential lifetimes is after you die, you're supposed to do these life reviews and you're supposed to say, all right, well, I guess I could have done that better. And then you make arrangements with your higher self to be incarnated back into this world so that you can face these issues again and hopefully figure a way to alchemize it, or to if you feel there's a need for atonement, then a need for atonement. But if you've already been going through this process, then you already know, right? What it feels like to have died in a war, to have been raped, to have been murdered, to have lost your children, to experience natural catastrophes and cataclysms. You already know what it feels like because you've lived through it. So even though you don't actually remember the actual details of the event, you remember what it felt like. And that never leaves you. No. So that's why people that are moving along this path of ascension are far more intuitive, far more empathetic, and far more compassionate. Because even if it didn't happen to them on this physical life or on this planet in a previous life, it happened to them at some time in their soul's experience, and they remembered the experience and they'll never forget it. And that's why it's a terrible thing to say to somebody who's giving you comfort, who's giving you empathy, who's trying to sympathize with you, and to a person who has, let's say, less empathy and less compassion and less sympathy. When somebody tries to do that to them, they'll say, how could you possibly imagine what it's like to have, lost a child or have gone through a divorce? Or, well, we can, because we've all gone through it, considering the sequences and the expansive, nature of our lives. So we have to face the summation of who we were. Many of us have already done this. So it's not going to be that big of a deal when it happens.
I just want to have you say that again. We have to face the summation, right? All of it.
Well, I don't know how it's going to, for me, it was a whole myriad of faces that I saw that were me in previous lives. And they were not happy people, but they were just the ghosts of the residual ghosts, so to speak, or shadows of all of these lives that I lived in this reality, marred with disappointment and marred with tragedy and marred with limitations and, all of those things, they're there. But you know what? My sense was, thanks for showing me stuff I already know. I mean, I don't really need to go over this again, but thank you for showing it to me. But on the other hand, if you've never gone through the process, you've never considered the fact that you are guilty of some pretty bad things, that will be more akin to what happens to Oedipus when he encounters the Sphinx. The Sphinx is a very interesting being. It's a chimeric being. It has a human head and chest, and then it has a lion, and it has as the body of a lion and in the wings of an eagle. So it's chimeric, but it also is very astrologically based. So there's components of the eagle and the components of the lion within all of us, right? Those are astrological symbols. Those are archetypes. They exist within us. So what does he meet? He meets basically the summation of all of his limitations, all of his problems. It hasn't been addressed yet. So it's going to look like a beast. And so the name of that beast in as far as the mythologies or the archetypes is that's what we call a threshold guardian. It will not allow you to cross a threshold, a certain point. And that point is between the lower conventional third density reality and into a fourth density reality, where now you start seeing things that are beyond your conditioned, the conditioned matrix, the conditioned mind. You start seeing things because you're starting to expand your awareness to these potentials. What? You mean I could have already existed in a previous life? What was that like? Oh, geez, do I really want to know about this? And so if you've never faced it, all of your fears, and basically this is the fear of the unknown, of who you could have been or what you may have done in other previous lives. Well, let's say that every single transgression that you're guilty of, that you have been involved with, every single error, not the major ones, every single infraction, you already know at a soul's level.
Right.
You know it because you are connected to a higher self. All this information is there, but you haven't faced it yet. And so if you haven't faced these problems yet, it starts to build within you, is that there's a part of me that kind of suspects that maybe I wasn't such a great person in a previous, or maybe I have been a really terrible person, but I don't acknowledge that, you know, and so that will manifest itself as a beast. It'll manifest itself as a beast that will, if you can't face it, will annihilate you. It'll destroy you one way or another. Just like all the other people in the story were wiped out by the Sphinx when they were confronted by it. They weren't prepared. Oedipus is the only one in the story who's prepared to face it. But even after he faces it, the consequences were tragic because he wasn't self-aware. This is like the archetypal becoming self-aware experience. That if you've never done it before. Could you imagine, living in that time? Let's say that I grew up as in a Greek society as a man, and virtually all of us were involved in the armies of our city states. And you know how many swords I ran through people's bodies? Did I ever really sit down and question what effect that's going to have on my soul, or what effect is that going to have on my development? Did I ever see that as a problem, right? How many bodies have I hacked to pieces, or how many violent deaths have I died from, or how many famines have I gone through, or plagues? That's what it was like back then. I mean, hopefully by now, the last 2,000 years of the Christian experience, regardless of whether or not you think there's any benefit to it, there was benefit to it, because we were being told, even though it was being co-opted, even though it was being usurped, even though it was being inverted, there was still an element of truth within all of it that they couldn't touch. They couldn't touch it. And so it was still there. So if you listen to the words, and if you understood the intention behind all of it, and not which was not to control you or rule you, but to actually help your soul ascend into a more rarefied state, then the people have changed. We have changed. We're more genteel than we used to be 2,000 years ago. We were a little bit more rarefied as a group than we were even just 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. I mean, we're going through massive transformation right now. If you just look at movies from the 50s or 60s or the 70s, you go, did we really used to live like that? I mean, we were some pretty dense people just within a few generations ago. Even within just 5 years or 10 years ago, there's been huge changes, right? So we are going through this process of transformation, transfiguration. But in order for us to leave the third density, we have to confront the guardian of the threshold that keeps us from crossing it. And that may be a major barrier to a good percentage of people living on Earth right now. I would say there's a large percentage of people that will get through it. But I will also say that there's probably just as many that aren't going to get through it based on that experience.
Yeah. Wow. And it's what's so amazing that you're saying is that threshold guardian, it's specific and unique to each one of us. So what your threshold guardian experience would be, it's not like I could say, okay, Paul, tell me what it was like, for you, maybe fire or anger or rage or whatever is your thing. And somebody else might be starvation or deprivation or feeling like they don't have enough and they're lacking in something. And so we each meet it in our own ways based on the collection of our experiences, right?
It's always the same in the sense that it is the summation of all of your fears.
All of your fears.
Is what it is literally for me. It wasn't really a monster, or it was fear itself it manifested in a number of different dreams that culminated in a sense that I was told that the people or the people that rule this world are not of this world, that they're otherworldly, and that the secret that was whispered to me was that they were eating our children. They were consuming our children. They were eating our children. So that to me was about the worst thing I could possibly imagine. But even after I was told that, I'm like, I already knew this. I thought maybe it was metaphorically, but I now realize that it was more than just metaphorically. It was actually literally and metaphorically. They're feeding off of our young. They're feeding off of our children, and they're doing this, in any way virtually possible. So that it is that, and so you're going to have to face the fear, and you're going to overcome that fear, and then you're going to have to, you're going to have to get over it, and you're going to have to go through this process of, if you can, overcome the limitations through this fear. You're going to finally, at some point, come to meet the essence of, let's say, you're a fractal of something greater.
Yes.
You're a fractal of your higher self, right? So in my experience, I was a large piece of that higher self, let's say. But I think that's the experience that's coming. It's not facing the threshold guardian as much as it is coming to what we would basically call the sacred marriage. I mean, the Western Bible is all about that. If you read the New Testament, it's always about this sacred marriage. It's always about the coming together of union of soul to spirit. And that's what this whole thing was about, in preparing us for this experience of preparing for it. And that's where it says that, many people will witness this. Everyone's going to witness it. Everyone's going to be a witness to this experience.
Yes.
So many are called forth to have this experience, but fewer will be chosen, right, to go through this process. And so if you do, go through this process and you do become, to a certain degree, I think for virtually all of us, or most of us, it's going to be overwhelming just to realize that I was being lied to this whole time. And you mean to tell me that there's something far greater than me, that is the source of all of my love, and that in union with it, I'm as powerful as God? What? You can't live like that in this third density reality. It won't allow, you can't do that. It is by convention. Because remember, I think I'd mentioned this. The third density reality is not a real place. It's an artificial construct. It doesn't really exist. It's not natural. So it was created artificially so that we can have this experience. And so we have this concept of linear time and the concept of death through this experience, and then rebirth through this experience. But there's no God in this place. There's no spirit in this place. It's an artificial construct, right? And so you're going to come to the realization that there's something greater than this reality. I mean, I kind of have the feeling now, living in this world, that even if I go someplace, I'm going, well, I'm going to another part of the jail cell that I haven't seen yet, but it's still a jail cell. It's still, okay, great. There's an amusement park here, and there's a cathedral over here, and there's a pastor over here, and then there's a restaurant over here. It's the same crap. I mean, aren't you getting sick of it? It's like, let's do something different.
Yes.
Let's create a world that has real life in it, that has real meaning to it, right? Because everything right now is just a ridiculous backdrop, right? And so
what we're talking about also is with the replication of the same kinds of experiences in a matrix, that's all it can do is kind of duplicate itself and play by the same rules, where we're like on a loop of that karma again and again.
And every place is the
you
same.
Can't get in your car and go to the next level. It's not like you're going to take some road and leave that old life behind.
Nope.
You have to go inside and raise your frequency and come into a place of self-acceptance and self-awareness that opens that portal where you can experience what Jesus was experiencing that you're talking about, right? Where he went to the Father.
Well, now, okay. So now that you're bringing that up. So in the initial experience, you can go through a sequence of visions or experiences. Listen, these visions, as far as the summation of fear goes, you'll probably have visions of it. But let's face it, it's manifesting right now in the physical plane already. This is it. And it's going to get worse in that perspective if you don't understand what's really happening. Okay. But even if you go through the union, the sacred union, you can't be one with your higher self and come back, because coming back into the third density, it's not allowed. You can't do that. It doesn't. You have to wake up from the dream or from the altered state of consciousness and come back into the artificial construct where it doesn't exist. You cannot be like Jesus. The only person that I'm aware of, despite what anyone else claims, to have been able to go, because he said, I go to the Father. And he came back, and he was a living testament to that, right? Is that no one has ever been able to accomplish that, ever, in a living life, in a life that is, is a corporeal life. No one's been able to do that. So there's another guardian. There's not one guardian, there's two guardians.
Oh.
Yeah. So the first guardian between the third and the fourth density is the summation of all of our fear, right? And it's called the lesser guardian of the threshold. And it may present as a beastly being. It may not, but you definitely have to face the summation of all your fears and all that you have been. That's your karma. But then there's the fourth density that we may be breaching into. I think I'm in it when I'm not working. I'm in it when I'm not in traffic. I'm in it when I'm in the moment. I'm in it when I'm with people that I love. I'm in it when I'm doing things that I love. So we're already breaching into that fourth density. But then there's another guardian between the fourth and the fifth density. And then in that guardian between the fourth and the fifth density. So it's called the greater guardian of the threshold. And it will not allow you to pass. You cannot pass that threshold unless you die. You can die and pass the threshold. Or if you're not going to die, if it's not your time, you can't pass the threshold.
Hmm.
So there's still a separation between 3 and 4, third and fourth density existence, and then this higher awareness, which we're all striving to get to, which is fifth density awareness, the fifth density consciousness. In the mythologies, in our own mythologies, there was something called thrice great, thrice great. So all the heroes of our mythologies became thrice great. And so they were basically elevated into the status of gods by our Heavenly Father at that time, which we called Zeus. So the way that it's explained is that it's amazing to just be born into this world, just once into this world. And once you enter into the karmic cycle, from a universal perspective, everyone who's done this is considered to be great. It's a mark of achievement for a soul to have become part of this grand experiment. And it's looked upon very reverently by the people and the beings in other worlds. And that's where we have this moniker of being great. Just living this life, no matter how stupid of a life you've lived or how wrong of a life you lived, just being born into this world.
Yes, is
yes,
great.
Supposedly there's an exponential amount of souls that want to have this experience that haven't been born into this world. They're just waiting for the chance to incarnate. But I think the grand experiment's ending now. But when you go through the process of meeting your soul, the elements of the best elements of your soul, coming into awareness of your higher self and making union briefly with your higher self, you go through 2 things. You go through a second birth, right? Your ego dies, so you can say the death of the ego. I've heard it called the second death. I don't know exactly why it's the second death, but the ego dies the supremacy of the ego dies. And you're born again in a greater state of consciousness. So this is what the term born again comes from. It comes from us going through this reunion, even if it's brief. And now we're living with an awareness of something greater than what we were led to believe. This is where we're redeemed. So we've gone through the union and now we've been redeemed. Redeemed souls are considered twice great because they were born twice into this world in the same life.
Wow.
Twice great.
It's great.
But then there was this concept of thrice great. So in thrice great, in the previous ages, in the age of the Aries, which was before the age of Pisces, if you did something really magnificent, and you lived a selfless life, and you were virtuous, and you were an inspiration to all of your fellow beings, then the gods would reward you because they loved you so much that they would place you up in the heavens, and that's why we call those celestial realms or those constellations, why we name them after those beings, because they're in the heavens and their presence is constantly influencing us in positive ways. So that's called being born a third time. But being born a third time into the heavenly realm, that's being called thrice great. Now, Jesus was thrice great, but he was born into the world for a third time. He came into the world completely whole. At least in the last 3 years of his life, he became thrice great in the sense that he was a living manifestation of his full potential. He was completely one with his higher self, with his spirit. And that's why he said, I went to the Father and I've opened the portal. I've done this for all of us. This is the archetype. This is the prototype. This is what's meant for us to happen now, is now. Thrice great, right? So that's what I think the fifth density means. It means that we're going to go through this process of being born once, then twice, which I think is where this global event is going to happen that's going to catalyze things for us. But I think there's still going to be a window after that. There has to be. I was given 15 years to figure this out. So, that where we go from this event, where consciousness shifts, where we start realizing we're in a new time space. It's Aquarian time. And now we're not going to be quite desperate, but we're going to crave. The word is crave. And now I saw that in the astrology. If we ever get time, we'll talk about it, in the astrology of this summer, that there's going to be a compulsion. We're going to want to, with all of our heart and soul, to be able to contribute to this the ascension of the earth, to this transfiguration. It's going to be the only thing that we're going to be consumed by.
Compelling. It's going to be so compelling.
And actually Lilith is involved in it, we're going to be looking around going, you mean to tell me that there's been people that have been keeping me alive, that have protecting me, that have pulled me along this whole time, and no one ever told me this? This is what happened to me. I felt ashamed. I felt like, oh no, I can't allow this to happen. I'm going to do everything that I can to pick up that yoke and to help pull. Just imagine if that happens to millions, if not billions of people, which is really what it's going to be like. You're going to be living in service to others. So it's going to be like heaven, because everyone's going to be doing things so that life is no longer fighting against you. And you're going to be doing things not just for each other, but for the world itself, and creating a garden. And so that goes through this process of the union of soul to spirit, and redemption from your fear, redemption from control, and all these other things, right?
Yes.
But that's not fifth density. That's fourth. Fifth density, there will be people that will be living amongst us, I think, that will have ascended to fifth density. That will be thrice great. They won't be put up into the heavens, and they won't be a living example that lives next to us every step that we take in the embodiment of Christ, Sophia, right? It won't be quite like that. But there's going to be hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people that will, when this event happens, it's not going to be foreign to them. It's not going to be the first time that it happened. It's going to be extraordinarily familiar to them. It's going to be like not a union. It's going to be a reunion. And they're going to be, oh yeah, okay, now finally we can get to work. So I think, as I envision this, what's going to happen is that there's going to be people that will, when this transition happens, that will be coming back now, and they'll be Christ-like. They'll have the full capacity of and the full manifestations of their truth. So now, not everyone will aspire to this who makes it through this event, whatever that is. But there's going to be people that are going to aspire towards these other people, and they're going to be present, and they're going to be all over the place. And there's going to just be this irresistible connection between everybody, but specifically these people. Now, what's it going to be like, right? And so in the essay that I wrote, I said, well, there has to be another sacrament. There is another sacrament. So the Gnostics, and it's very important that your source is telling us we need to consider Gnosticism, because that's what this is. This is Gnosticism. This is being a Gnostic, a knower. This was buried information. This was suppressed information. But even then, in the writings and in the conceptions that they had, the last two sacraments were the sacred union and then redemption. And I'm like, that can't be. There has to be another sacrament in order for this to happen. And so, looking at the sacraments, I realized that there is a sacrament in the conventional lower religions called ordination. And that's when you become a priest. But it's the church that dispenses it, which is invalid. They have no authority to do it. They never did. So they hijacked it. And so they created their own, like, let's say, third density priests,
Yes.
right? So there are seven sacraments, but the new sacrament will be ordination. So those who come back
Yeah.
in ascended fifth density state, they're not going to just be doing their thing. They're going to have the power and authority of the heavenly realms. Their will be divine will. Their power will be divine power. And if you want to say that it's charged to you or given to you through your heavenly Father, just like Jesus said, that's absolutely true. And you're doing it in reverence to our Holy Mother, right? So you're doing this to rebuild Gaia and to bring all of her children up to that level. So there are already people that are predestined or pre-prepared for this. You know, they talk about the 144,000. That's a very specific reference to a very specific group. Personally feel like there could have been some what they call bifurcation of souls, but I also feel like they're only making a reference to one little planet, one little source. Could you imagine? I don't think that's Arcturian. I don't think that's Pleiadian. I don't think that's, Sirius. I think there's been a massive migration of other souls that they can't resist. So they're here now. So that 144,000 is going to be more like maybe tens of millions, maybe millions. I don't know. But they're all primed for this to happen. They're all ready for this to happen. So that when it happens,
good news, Paul. This is good news because it's been pretty dark for some time, but what we're talking about today is coming through these thresholds and out the other side of, yes.
Right. So when this happens, it's going to, and again, you can't control this. You can't stop this. I mean, if this happened to little old me, and I have no idea what's going to happen on the other end of this, but I mean, if you question, why am I here? Why is Marie and I having this discussion right now? It's in preparation for this.
Yes.
Your whole life has been in preparation for this. Your whole life has been in preparation for this.
100%.
So it doesn't distinguish us from everybody else because we're all one and we're all here with these little tasks to do these different things. And I always said, for me, heaven is going to be when I am done teaching, when the students, when the people who are coming through are teaching me, and I say, that's it, I'm in heaven, I'm done. I'm going to just be me. I'm just going to do what I want to do. And because we've passed that point.
Yes.
We've passed that point. So what you mentioned something beforehand, and I lost my train of thought, but that's okay. I mean, so we're coming through here. There is a vanguard of people. Oh yeah, you said that it sounds like we're in a new time-space continuum, doesn't it?
It sounds like
heaviness. I mean, look at what's going around us. All the tragedy, all the noise, and all the darkness. It's getting to be like meaningless. I hope everyone's listening to this is realizing it's just a siren going off that doesn't mean anything. It's just noise. There's no more energy behind it. They could conjure up any stupid idea that they want, or to try to scare you. But it's
like nothing can stop what's coming, so they can do all.
That's what redemption is.
Yeah,
that's what redemption is, right?
Okay.
So this is what I saw this summer. So I always try to do my astrology readings, and I don't know how I have no formal training in it, which allows me to interpret it the way that I see it. I use a very simple program that helps to allow me to see the major positions and aspects of what's going on, and that's it. It's real simple. But remember, I told you a little over 3 years ago that we were all going to get crucified. There was this grand cross up in the sky that
it was so intense. It was so, what was it, the Grand Cardinal cross.
It was a cardinal fixed grand. It wasn't cardinal. It was a fixed grand cross, fixed cross, and it was a grand cross, and nobody wanted to talk about it. Nobody wanted to talk because it's four squares.
Yeah.
Well, listen, 3 years have gone by. Were we or were we not crucified?
Yes.
They nailed us to a cross. We couldn't move. We got killed, you know, and I don't just mean that metaphorically. I mean physically. I mean, there was a lot of harm, and there was a lot of energy behind it. Well, so I look at the astrology of and 3 years, exactly 3 years, from June 20th, 21 to June 20th, 24. And guess what I see? I see another cross. It's not a grand cross.
Okay.
It is not a grand cross. And a cross meaning there's crosshairs there. So a grand cross is like this, 290 degrees, you know, I mean 490 degrees, forming the squared cross. And it was fixed, and it was terrible. It was awful.
Nothing was going to stop that from coming. Right.
And it lasted for 3 years. So we went from a square, you know, a grand cross. All of a sudden, we see this. It's not a square, it's a rectangle. We went from this, two oppositions squared to themselves. Now we saw this. Not exactly the same. There's still two oppositions there, and they're major oppositions. But we went from a square to what they call the mystical rectangle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, or a spiritual rectangle. It's very significant. No one talked about it either, and I keep going. Is anyone out there paying attention? But it's called Huber's mystical rectangle or spiritual rectangle. So now at that moment, exactly at the time, there's this. It's like the cross relaxed.
Yeah.
Why is it significant? Well, we go from 90-degree angles to two trines, which are 120 degrees, and we also look at two sextiles, which are 60 degrees. Totally different energy. So arduous cross square versus trines, which are there to assist us in this transfiguration in a much more easier way now.
Oh, I like that.
So sure, there's going to be challenges. We see it all over the place, but the energy's been gutted. That obstructing, dark, harsh energies is completely and utterly annihilated. I looked at it and I said, "Oh, we're moving into a new time space. This really is now Aquarian energy. We're no longer. There's no more Pisces energy whatsoever. These crazy ideas that they're coming up with, and all of this fear. You can feel it, like you said. It's evaporating, or it's melting, or it's dissolving now.
Yes.
So it's going to be like this. It's going to be, oh my God, this has happened. And it's going to be like, yeah, but we got this already taken care of because we want to phase this new thing in. Or people are going to, and if we go through this transition, and we do see people who have now the final sacrament is ordination. I don't think I've mentioned this, but the final sacrament is ordination. So they're going to come back into this world carrying the power and the authority of our spiritual parents, of the universe, of these universal.
You're talking about a group who's moved through the second threshold. Like, you're talking about a group that are human beings. They're not just celestial beings flying back from non-physical realms as angels or something. You're talking about human beings who have reached this level of consciousness,
who have crossed the final.
Go to the Father.
Yes, because it is the higher self that is the threshold guardian of the greater threshold. So it's Christ higher self, sophic energies that have now allowed us to cross because it wasn't time. Now the gates are open, and now it's time. So there's going to be these people that will go through it, that will come into full union with their higher self. It will transfigure them. It'll be a massive transfiguration. and they will not be controlled at all by the little ego. There may be remnants of it. There'll still be personalities, and they have the option now to move on, or they have the option of coming back into physical life, at least for a period of time. And that's the ordination part of it. And so they're going to be ordained like priests and priestesses. They
In the
will come
best
back
sense.
and they will,
In the celestial sense.
yes, in the power invested within them through the Spirit, right? And so they're going to be, they will be recognized. There will be no doubt that they will be recognized, because in higher worlds this actually happens, and they're considered either kings or queens of wisdom, or priests or priestesses of wisdom. So that's our archetype that's coming back, and so these beings will come back, and so that's coming. So
Wow, Paul.
yeah,
You've
I know.
given us such a gift to see.
So,
I mean, talk about a bigger picture, the depth and breadth
yeah,
within it. But within your
yeah.
descriptions, I think people can see this playing out and feel that squared cross that was so rigid and tense, and nothing was going to stop it.
Relax.
And what did you call it? A mystical
The
rectangle?
mystical rectangle, Huber's mystical rectangle, or righteous rectangle. Yeah, it's there. And that's it. That's the sign, along with, the lights in the sky, and along with the northern lights and all that other stuff. I mean, and the solar activity and all that. It's happening. I really think it's happening. We really don't have much more time left. Things can't,
72% is close. I
we
mean, I'm feeling
can't,
that.
we can't, these dark energies, they're just starting to dissipate, like you said. So we're close to something, I think. And not everyone's coming, and that's okay. There's no judgment in any of this. If you want to just keep playing in that sandbox, and you want to just, keep living in 3D conflict because your soul needs it, wonderful. It's just not going to happen here anymore. It's not destined to happen here anymore.
No.
Gaia is ascended.
Our mother
Gaia
isn't going to host that anymore. Exactly. The host has said, no, we're moving on. Yes.
and billions of our children are saying, I'm done, and I want
Yes.
something better. And it's not going to be one person. There's going to be hundreds of thousands, if not millions, that'll be amongst us, that will inspire us, that will help to drive all of this. And it's going to be amazing. It already is, to me, amazing. I already do see this happening on many different levels.
I see it too, Paul. I see it in the communities that I'm a part of, the people that I know. There's this turning also that I can really feel that's so palpable, of people coming together to collaborate, that it's the most important thing. Even if it's something to do with business or whatever, that what matters most is that we're working together. And I've watched that start to collapse in certain communities. Any lingering talk about that sum of all fears or whatever, of like the arduous nature of having to do it on our own in separation consciousness, that we have to keep plugging, we're not doing that anymore. We're turning to each other. We're each bringing our gifts and talents. And it opens this pathway that was not open to the single person or individual. It's this collective collaboration, cooperation that is opening portals with a greater ease, right? There's something really
I think, no, yeah. I think the turning is the right, is the
turning.
perfect term. Turning. And to me, it's like, it's when we stop looking at all of the chaos and all the deception and all the lies, and basically all of the falseness of this matrix, which is a false world, and turning towards the light, turning towards the higher self, coming into knowing that. And
Yes.
then and in doing that, knowing ourselves and realizing our interconnectedness with each other, and realizing that this is the only way that we can possibly move forward. It's the only way that we can live. And after whatever these events are going to be, that's all the people that are going to be left, are people that understand this, that live within that light, that live within that truth, that live within that energy, all of the people that will be left, and I'm hoping there'll be billions of us, that will come to recognize that we are part of a larger spiritual family. But I think Jesus was making some interesting references to that. It's not just in a metaphorical state or in a spiritual state, like one that we can't understand. There's going to be all kinds of other worlds that are going to be involved in this. And they're just waiting for us to finally turn around and face the truth, because they're just waiting for us to not just give consent, but to embrace them in this reality moving forward. Because we're going to find that a lot of us are from those worlds, right?
Right. That's why I feel so familiar. It's going to be easier to take that turn because we're going to remember.
Yeah.
We remember.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And imagine meeting a long lost, sibling you haven't seen, almost your whole life. It's going to be magnified. It's going to be way more intense than that. And there, it's just going to be amazing, right?
It is going to be
So we
amazing.
got all of those, yeah, we have all of those things that I think it's, I'm just, again, the question is, when will it happen? 72% sure.
Dude.
We'll
Well,
see it. We'll see it. We'll see it before the end of 2025. But I don't care anymore. I mean, as long as we're still moving in that direction, they're saying that sometimes it's delayed because we want to try to get as many people prepared for this that can be prepared. But then you get to a point where there's just only so much you can do. And there's just so many people around us that aren't going to prepare for it or aren't really willing to face the challenges that we have to face, which is facing the summation of all that we were. But in the process of doing that, we step into a new timeline, which is our Dharma, which is all that we are manifesting, all the potential of all that we can be is really what it is. And so it's our true God self. And that's what Dharma is. It's the fullness, or it's the potential for all that can be, all that we're moving towards. And so really at that crossroads, we're like the initiate that's sitting on the throne. And on the one hand, on the left side is all that has been, and on the right side is all that, is all that can be. And we're right there, and we're making that decision. Every person that has to sit on the throne. I said that happened in January of 2020, when I think that's when we were all made to sit on the throne, and we were all made to make a decision at that point as to where you wanted to go. Right. And you can see now, 3 years later, 4 years later, it's been made. You've made the decision one way or another. There's still people that have to prepare. And I think that even after the event or events happen, there's still going to be that time where we're going to have to be at time where we're all going to try to, the goal, I think, is for the entire world to ascend. And maybe that'll take decades. Maybe it'll even take longer. Maybe it'll take a century. I don't know. But I think we'll move very quickly towards that. If an idiot like me could figure it out in 15 years, I think most people are going to be ready for it, especially when there's all of these, people to inspire us, all of these positive, things that we'll be moving towards that we can contribute to as a community. It's going to be amazing. And I think
it's going to be joyful creation, joyful creation. You can't help but to want to be a part of it.
Yes. You're going to be proud of who you are. You're going to be proud of your community. You're going to be proud of your world. And I don't know if pride is a sin or not. I don't think it is. It is. It's an amazing thing when you're sharing this outpouring of love with everybody else. It's going to give us great satisfaction to be able to do those things.
Yes, it's so good, Paul. And to be talking this way, because I know we've had many podcasts, certainly 3 years ago, where we saw that fixed cross and the dark forecast that was kind of projecting out that was going to be tough and rough. And I love how you said today that so much of what's still playing out right now in the illusion, but to a lot of people it appears real, is just noise. It's a great way to sort of contain what could otherwise be chaotic. If people could learn to hear whatever's going on, almost like back in the day with the Peanuts and the teacher, you just hear wah 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 wah. There's
There's
just
a lot of wah, wah,
there's
wah,
a
wah
lot of
going
wah wah
on.
going on. And if we can put a kind of a container on that and say that that's not what's real, right? And that it is just noise. We're the creators, and there are going to be more and more of us turning to that light. And you know what's like with anything? If enough people are turning and looking at something that's really good, people are going to say, why would I be turning and giving my full attention to that noise when this glorious light show is going on over here? Right? It's going to be so beautiful in the best way, that like being captivated by God's design and creation. I think there's going to be many more projects that people are going to want, like willingly bring their energy and give that energy to those projects or manifestations or whatever that is. And the what loses is the illusion. And that was in a recent message that I've done a video on that came through, that you lose. There's the word lose in illusion. You lose in the illusion. You win in creation, right? And we're flipping out of losing, all the centuries of losing in the illusion, because that's what we're all coming out of, to win in creation individually, but really as a collective, as more and more soul groups coming together. It feels glorious. And I love that you're feeling it, seeing it in the astrology. And we're both in our own ways turning towards it. And I see more people that I know, at least, facing that summation of all fears, because we're all going through it, that we're still being squeezed on that front, because right, we're in that process. And people have heard me share that in some of my recent videos, Paul. I don't know if you would have seen that, but just for me, if you said it was fear itself, right? Maybe that's what it is for all of us, whatever we most fear, but the core energy is fear itself. For me, it's just an old trigger of childhood, and it's a story. And but public speaking in certain ways can trigger this feeling in me from lifetimes of having been crucified for speaking the truth to the masses in a world that you had to lose in the illusion. And usually it was, for me, probably losing my life. And it came up as a child this lifetime in certain circumstances to squeeze that soul memory. And now, after having collapsed that and worked through that on so many levels of my being, but there's a remnant in the summation of all of my fears. There's a remnant frequency in the right circumstances that I'll be squeezed, where all of a sudden I'll freeze and I can't find my words right now. And I don't think that's the truth of me. It's just some old aspect of me that's coming up. And I think that may be presenting itself for other people. We might be thinking, I thought I worked through that. I thought I cleared that already. I thought I already moved through whatever that issue was. And somehow at that threshold, the threshold guardian is saying, well, there's this eensy weensy bit of your karma still lingering that you've got to release to go through my threshold, right? And I love how you've explained that today, because it feels very timely for me. At first, I was surprised that it was coming up. And now that I've seen it coming up, of course, I need to turn to it. Of course, I need to work through that. Why would I have it any other way? Right? I want all of me going through the threshold, right? And I won't go through the threshold unless all of me is ready. So we're all facing it in our own ways, however that's coming up for us. But it should get easier and easier as we see others of us going through the challenges of that right now. And if we all keep moving steadily towards the light, right? That's what this time is. And that's the beauty and the grace of it, is to have the humility to say, yes, something uncomfortable is still coming up for me, but I'm going to keep going. I'm going to get it the support that it needs. I'm going to release it and integrate myself. And I'm going through the thresholds, right? Nothing's going to stop me from ascending. That's a great phrase. Nothing's going to stop me from ascending, just like nothing's going to stop this new world that's emerging, right? This age of Aquarius that's so beautiful. So I hope like our listeners can feel the way we're talking. Both of us, I think, are speaking from a place of gnosis. People who watch our podcast together know that we share a lot from a place of knowing deep inside ourselves. We know it. We're not just thinking it or hoping it's this way or maybe believing it's this way, right? I think it comes from a place of remembering and knowing. Maybe we have a better, easier way to access the future. We can feel it. We can remember ourselves just a few months down the road, right? We can access the future and bring it into now. So beautiful.
Absolutely. Just keep in mind too that, this happened, or something. I think the archetype of whatever this thing is that we're going through, to me 15 years ago, and I was in no way, shape, or form perfect. It just happened. It happened. So even when we go through all of it, we still won't be perfect. And there's still many, 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 many different levels that of ascension that we would go through to continuously perfect ourselves. So we're striving for being whole, and we're striving to be loving, and we're striving to be a radiant star. But we'll still have elements of the darkness with us. I actually said that in the essay. I said that sometimes the threshold guardian is viewed as a dragon, right? It's a draconian being, and certainly the cycles of the moon are called as a draconian cycle. It's because the lunar nodes are considered the great dragon, and so it's a great teacher.
Interesting.
So there's going to be elements within us that won't come with us, but I've come to the conclusion that third density dragons are adversarial, and they're beastly, and we're always up against them. But I realize that in the higher realm, in the fifth density, they're not. You have to harness the power of that dragon, and I think that we will be doing that for righteous reasons, because the dragon winds up becoming, think about it, the dragons are always looking for a more ascended being to serve. That could be a dark being, but it could also be a light being. All the gods and goddesses had dragons, and they faithfully executed whatever commands they were given. Now, if you had a loving, godlike person who had a dragon, you could apply that energy for extremely powerful and positive outcomes. Absolutely. So you can also look at the dragon as the fire within us. So because it
alchemical, is kind of transmutational
manifestation of something within us also. So we don't have to be perfect to go through this, and won't even be perfect when we come back. And Jesus wasn't perfect either. If you read the scriptures carefully, he was sometimes really upset, or sometimes was playing practical jokes, or sometimes was, he wasn't paying attention, and he was being schooled at times by people that you wouldn't expect. So it's all good, right? I think we're ready. There's no point of trying to wait till we're perfect, and there is never going to happen. So I think that we're getting to the point now where, and I also am under the impression that it's going to happen when we want it to happen. I think we can conjure up the storm when we're ready.
As a collective.
I think it can.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, and as an individual and as a collective. I think we'll get to a point where we'll know that it's time. And now that these things are going to blindside the people that are already on this path. It's like I told you before, when Atlantis went down and it sunk, it wasn't like it didn't happen. People weren't blindsided by it. Those who were unaware of what was going on were blindsided, but people knew well in advance what was going to happen. So I think that, like I said, I'm 72% sure today that we'll be seeing something. So maybe tomorrow might be 80%. I've never hit 80%. I've never even went past 75. There are some days where freaking 60, 65.
Talk about a
There was
threshold.
even,
Yeah, you're
yeah, there was
close.
even there was even one day where I thought 20%, but then Nancy had a vision. Just she gave me the next day and it went back up to 72%. So, it's just amazing because we're entangled. This is a quantum reality. We're entangled. We're experiencing synchronicities and messages, and we're just starting to develop this intuitive knowing that something's coming soon.
I like that. Soon. I just want to say two things for anybody that's watching The Chosen. I haven't seen season 4 yet, but I know the first few seasons. The word soon is said so many times in the script writing. And I think that's also, I think, there's shows and stories of our time that I think are reflecting what a humanity is going through, right? It resonates with a large group of people. And I think that awareness of soon is throughout that story. When's this going to happen? Soon. When's Jesus going to start teaching? Soon, right? When are more people going to turn to this awareness in Jesus's day? Soon. So I think we're in this time of soon now, and seeing real changes, real shifts taking place. And for people who've been looking for the signs and wonders of that, I think it is changing where we can actually see and differentiate, not everybody, but a lot of people, the noise from the truth of what's really emerging, that it's far better. It's going to be far better than people imagine. And I was also going to say, isn't 2024 the year of the dragon? Isn't it the year of the dragon in like Chinese astrology, maybe something? I
I
think
should
it's
know
in
this. It might be. I don't know. I don't know.
in something. I think there is a year of a dragon. So
Oh,
I
there is for sure. I thought it was last year, but maybe it's this year. I don't know. I used to keep calendars uh, in the office, and they were Chinese calendars, so it always would remind me of what
yes.
year we were in. And this is the first year I stopped doing that. So
Oh, interesting.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
It might be the dragon, which would have been a cool calendar to have in the office, but I didn't get one this year.
Right. Well, you're tapped
Maybe it
into
is.
that though. You're tapped into like all the divine aspects of what dragons in a celestial sense can really represent for us, instead of just the dark, intense threshold guardian that's scary and ominous, right? Again, in a usurped creation, that's how it would be depicted. The greatness of what the dragon can offer to us would be the sum of all of our fears that we have to meet, right? So we're coming through that. So, well, thank you. It is always a pleasure, Paul, to have you in these podcast series. It does go out to Whole Soul Mastery and Whole Soul School and Foundation. And I think that the timing of that is also very important. So maybe we can do this again sooner rather than later, because I think we're just going to continue to see change. And you're just such a beautiful messenger of the changes humanity's living through. So thank you. Thank you for being with me today, Paul.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Yeah. And thank you. Thank you to all of our listeners who stay with us through the end. I know a lot of people over the years really have enjoyed the podcast with Dr. Panzica and I. And we look forward to gathering again soon as we ride the waves of 2024, come through this summer here in the Northern Hemisphere, at least, and enter this time of which Paul is talking about, 72%. Maybe we'll be at that 80 or 85% by then. We'll see. We'll see. But thank you, everyone. We'll see you soon. Blessings.